A major scheme to redevelop Douglas Promenade has been put on hold. The new Infrastructure Minister Phil Gorn has called a halt just ahead of work that was due to start on the second phase. Minister, the work was due to get underway as the horse tram season ended. Can you tell us what's happened now?
Yes, this is something that I suppose inevitably any minister that takes on a new portfolio wants to question anything that's being done, and the actual promenade scheme is a big, expensive scheme. So I've had a look at this. Added to which we've had various consultations ongoing. We've had meetings with different people. We've met with Douglas Corporation, also met with hoteliers and some of the retailers. And certainly the hoteliers and retailers were deeply concerned at the proposal with the way things were going, with the horse tram track being actually on the promenade, but at the side of the promenade. They were concerned about loss of parking spaces. So we had a look at this, and a suggestion had been made, well, why don't you put the track onto the promenade walkway? So I, not unreasonably, then asked the question, and a whole range of different officers said, well, yes, actually, that's not such a bad idea, but formally, when we'd thought about doing that, there had been problems in terms of the Iris tanks at the sea terminal end of the walkway, so that had made it difficult. But I said, well, can we have a look at that to see whether that's resolvable or not? And they've now thought, well, actually it possibly is. So we didn't want to crack on with phase 2 and then find that we've designed something which we then had to change again at a later stage. So that's why we delayed the start of phase 2 this month, and now I think we're taking the view that we should ask the public and indeed all the decision makers what their views are, whether we should go with the originally designed scheme or whether we should now look at another version of the scheme, which would be putting the tram tracks on the promenade walkway.
Which to many people would seem like the sensible solution, to have them on the walkway. Why was that not considered originally? You were talking about the Irish scheme.
Yeah, that was the primary reason, actually. And bearing in mind that the tanks are only run for a relatively short section, I think we did go back and question that decision and had another look at it, and certainly there have been some advances in technology and availability of certain things which have now allowed us to look at that as a reasonable option. So we're not saying that we've definitely made our mind up that the track should go on the promenade walkway, but it is now an option. Added to which, of course, we've had concerns expressed about the overtopping from the high tides that have become more frequent, and potentially by moving the tram track onto the promenade walkway allows us to incorporate in the foundations of that track foundations for a dwarf wall, which could also then stop some of the overtopping. That would be an additional cost, obviously, to the scheme, but bearing in mind this is a 50-year at least investment, bearing in mind that the existing promenade's been down for at least 70 years, I think it's probably worth putting a little bit extra in to get the extra security from not having the lots of stones and waves and things crashing over onto the actual road itself.
In terms of the delay, I mean, we've seen the first phase completed with the Jubilee clock and the roundabout here. I think people would say that the promenade now is practically impossible to drive along. Are we looking at now a long delay before that's roadworthy?
No, we aren't. Phase 2 was largely about improving the walkways and footpaths and general outlook of a small section from the sea terminal to Regent Street. So there's going to be a slight delay in that part of the scheme, but the overall, or the main part of the scheme, was due to start round about April next year. And that is still going to be the deadline. Now, to be fair on the officers who were designing the scheme, they had accommodated phase 2 being brought forward into this year, which was a political wish. But their preferred option would have been always to start in April, because that gives us time to properly and fully design the scheme and get all the permissions required, so we know that we're not just starting off with phase 2 and then not having permission to do the rest. So I think the officers and the designers are much happier with the new way that we're going about things, and it will mean that when we do go to Tynwald, hopefully in either March or maybe April, we will have a complete package, a complete understanding available to Tynwald members, so they're fully aware of what is being proposed for the whole of the promenade.
So you're looking at phase 2, which takes us to Regent Street, and phase 3 taking place at the same time. Then it will be one project from next April. And can that be done? Will the tram track be done at the same time, or is that something for later?
I would imagine that we would do the track at the same time, so it's entirely possible that we will be able, and this again is a little bit unfortunate, that we will actually be able to run the horse trams next year, potentially, if we go with that alternative option that we're looking at. And as I say, we haven't made a definite decision on this, but it's an option, and I felt it was an option that we should at least talk to people about and give as an option to Tynwald members, so they can either decide, oh, actually we liked the scheme as it was, we'll carry on doing it that way, or we'll move it onto the walkway. The advantage of the walkway scheme is that there will be a lot more parking created by that new scheme, so there'll be more parking than there is at the moment, which I think certainly from all the surveys that we've had undertaken, and there was a report produced into parking for the department in 2013, which again clearly demonstrated a need for more parking. So I think that would certainly help in that regard. So I think the promenade walkway scheme certainly has its attractions in that regard. There will be people, though, I suppose, who will say that mixing horse trams with pedestrians and push bikes maybe isn't the right thing to do, and inevitably there will be people who will have opposing views as to how we go about this.